Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. My guest today is entrepreneur Rich Goldsmith, co-founder at MOJU. Rich, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
No problem, Simon. Good to be here.
Do you mind starting off by telling my audience a little bit more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So, my name's Rich Goldsmith. I founded a company called MOJU coming up to 5 years ago now, alongside a really, really good friend of mine called Charlie Leet-Cook. We founded the business based on the principles of really functional foods and functional drinks. We were working super hard in sort of city-type jobs, corporate jobs, having left uni and spent 4 or 5 years doing that. And we came across cold pressed juice, and cold pressed juice to us was really a functional fix. So, how can we get nutrition in as quick as possible, as conveniently as possible, as fresh as possible? The one problem there was that was compromised by the fact that it was really expensive. So we sort of sought about a way to take that product and bring it into more of a mainstream consumer base rather than kind of the wellness audience. And from there, we sort of launched functional shots, which the business now today, the brand is all about functional shots. We launched those in 2016. We've grown that into north of a sort of 18 million plus category now in the UK. And that has been a really fun ride along the way, a lot of hard work, but we sort of live for the team and the people, and that's such an important part of what we do. So, as I say, good to be here, and looking forward to having a chat.
I'm a big fan of the product. I'm going to put that out there up front to my audience. So I'm pro this product, and so when I permanently say how amazing it is, I just want my audience to realise I'm a big fan. So, I mean, functional shots, an interesting model. It is definitely one of those products that if you just fancy a quick boost, you can quickly grab one and drink it, and it's no fuss. So you've done a good job there. I'm fascinated always by people that have started a business and perhaps not necessarily started a business before. So I'm just looking at your resume, which is just kind of so simple. 2015, you quit your job and started this company. And so, what happened? Again, always for my audience, I'd like them to understand the process of why people start businesses, to inspire them and or scare them. How did it happen exactly? Yeah,
so I guess it's always been there for me in terms of wanting to do something and create something for myself. I was always pretty, I guess you would class me as entrepreneurial when I was younger. Always had jobs from paper rounds since I was sort of 13, getting up at crack of dawn and cycling my BMX around the local neighbourhood, and always had summer jobs and just grafted really. And that the same goes for my co-founder Charlie. When we left university, it was a case of we followed a very sort of standard path. We sort of left school, went to university. I studied engineering. From there, we kind of got graduate roles, and then I sort of went from a graduate role doing a commercial role for a very large aerospace firm, moved to the city, investment banking job, all the way along, not really getting that energized off it. For sure, didn't find that it really kind of ticked the boxes for me in terms of what I wanted out of life, and I felt that kind of creative spark wasn't really. I didn't manage to kind of express that in the roles I was doing. So it really went from finding a product with a mate and a shared passion with a really good friend of mine, and saying, how do we build a business that we would love to work in, that other people would love to work for, and how do we do it differently from the corporate roles and corporate jobs that we've had before. And that was really the initial spark, I suppose, when people talk about the light bulb moment. And then from there, it was applying what we had learned in our corporate lives and in those roles and the different jobs and the interactions we'd have with people. And one thing it really does teach you is about relationships, the importance of relationships, and fostering really strong commercial relationships with people. And that's something we've definitely brought into MOJU. So that was the kind of transition. But as I said, it was always a bit of a burning desire. So, and here we are today, 5 years later.
Did you sit down and really plan it? Or was it just kind of like, this is a really good idea, let's just start? How did you get going?
No, we did a lot of, without even knowing it, we did a lot of sort of testing of the market, iterating the product, developing the product, and even without knowing it, what we were doing at that point is sort of accelerating that product market fit piece, which tech firms talk about a lot, but actually we were doing that in what we in how we sort of took it to market. So it started off with Charlie's mum's book club, testing the recipes, refining them and honing them. And then we went to sort of music festivals. And, I like to say we were there in the morning, sort of bringing people back from the dead, at music festivals. And and we were trying the product in real life with people and sort of getting that response back. And when you talk food and drink, it's ultimately, that's what it's all about. It's all about that reaction you get from consumers. It's all about what they're looking for in a product. And the only way you can really do that, the best way you can do that when you come from out of industry, is to actually get there right in front of people, and learn like directly from them. So
I think that's a really good insight for my listeners there. I mean, you weren't in the drink space before, so I guess by sharing the product with the consumers and listening to consumers' feedbacks, you at the same time learning the industry that way.
Exactly, for sure. Because we came with no direct experience. So you can imagine the amount of acronyms in food and beverage. It's like any other industry. It was they're numerous, and we didn't have a clue what half of them meant. And that was one thing. But also just learning the system, the ecosystem of the industry that we were going into, and it takes time. And that really took a couple of years to really get our heads around. But it's like any other role. That's my view. Is it takes 6 months to a year to learn a role for anyone. Totally. And so that was similar for us, really.
I think
in terms of learning an industry.
What I really like about this point, and again, I always want the listeners to pick up on this, is that a lot of people would say, "Oh, I need to go work in a drinks company for years to understand it." But sometimes by going in fresh, first of all, you're not stealing anyone else's insights. You're doing it fresh and new and original, and you can go learn the industry. But because you've come from outside the industry, you're doing it differently, and I think that reflects in your product. By the way, do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one that definitely, if you look at all of the very successful businesses that have come through, it tends to come from a similar. It gets a little bit cliched, that leaving corporate world and jumping into a new industry, but fundamentally you do come with a fresh approach on stuff. And yeah, I think that probably does reflect in what we've done. If we listen to people, of which there are numerous naysayers, and it's not a malicious, they're not being malicious. They're just often it's because it's because, for example, to your point, they know the industry so well, but they're also ingrained in it's the way they do things is 20 years of like, this is the dogma. So by coming in from outside, you bring a fresh approach. So if we listened to the naysayers, we wouldn't be here today, and we certainly wouldn't have developed the same product that we have. When we first launch so for the audience benefit, functional shots they're essentially they're as close to the purest form of the raw ingredient as possible. So we use things like ginger and turmeric and these really potent natural ingredients, and then we sort of bottle them, keep them as fresh as possible. And the taste profile of those is powerful. They're strong. So if we had listened to people, we probably would have toned that down, because they would have said, the mainstream consumer or the mass market consumer is not going to like that. But we're sort of proving them wrong every single day. So,
yeah, I also think another point, you're taking your experience of where you worked before and what you didn't like about it, and trying to build a different culture inside your own business. I was reading about some of the things that you're doing, of course, things like the float tank sessions, which sounds cool. But maybe you can talk a little bit about building culture.
Yeah, so building culture for us was, we're really starting to pick up more steam now, I think, as we've started to really understand, as we've got more comfortable in our own skin as well as a business, and that takes time. People, great things take a long time to build, and as we've kind of the last 5 years, we've kind of got more comfortable in our own skin. We understand what we're about. We understand what we stand for as a business. And there is an element of it. It's a high performing culture where we are, and a very supportive one, and one that really looks after its people, but it is quite fast paced. And so the reason we sort of implement the things that we do is to try and make it as comfortable. The parts of the people's day that we try and make it as comfortable as possible, and provide them with things that help to look after more sort of the holistic, their well-being really, so they can do their best work, and sort of enjoy it as they do it. So that's taken us time to kind of iterate and develop and build, and we're at a stage now where, you know, we really focus on. We've got things like we've got, in addition to things like the float tank, which actually has been completely pushed to one side with COVID. But you know, and we used to do sort of a massage for the team each week and things like that, where they could choose their type of massage, could be sports massage or whatever. But then sort of the other bigger things is 2 days a year, sort of paid, where they can go and pursue a passion of theirs, and it might be a passion that's sporting related, but it also could be something where it's more social impact. So they want to do something in the local community, and the guys can get together and do things together as well. So there's those elements, and I think also obviously more recently as well is we've kind of gone to a fully working remote model. That's something that we're going to maintain, not necessarily fully, but definitely really believe in this sort of more hybrid model. Going forward, full flexi time in the business now. You know, we're big believers that if you hire people, you hire them, and you know, trust is there we trust people, and that's what it's about. So we trust them to work to their own schedule at home, and for those sort of more junior and younger coming into the team, what we do there is just provide a bit more of a structure and help them, sort of give them a bit more of a steer of how they can manage their day and time management and things like that.
Yeah, again, I always want the listeners to pick up on culture. I think it's one of those things that's so overlooked in building out a business. And one of the things I took when I was reading about what you guys are doing, I really, really liked as well, was this whole idea that you can go and pursue your passion. And so, for example, there's one person in your company who might become a personal trainer. He's learning to be a personal trainer. So maybe he'll leave you and go and do that. And you're encouraging him to do that. So you're not almost like forcing him to work for you. You're encouraging people to follow their passions and their purpose and support them. I think that's just so powerful. And I think resonates within the brand itself. And it's one of the reasons I love the brand. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And it's, and I think that's you know, there will be people that work in MOJU for many, many years, and then there'll be guys that go on to do other things, and you know, and who are we to stop that, and who are we to not encourage that and help them really, and what we do hope is that people will find sometimes, or on the majority will find, that they really are motivated, they love what they do with MOJU, but equally there's other things that they do that they also love. So it's allowing them and giving them time to do that, and saying it's all right. You know, you can have other interests and other passions. So, and giving them some time so they can pursue those as well. And I think as well, it's one of those old things. I don't think everyone knows what their passion is. So some people are trying to figure it out. So, you know, we just try and encourage people to find that. And it seems to, as you say, it resonates well, and it's a big part of why we do what we do ultimately.
It resonates with me because I'm also trying to help people find their purpose in life, and you know, you're giving people 2 days off a month and some money to help them find their purpose in life. So it's very forward thinking, and I know myself, people might leave the company and have an experience and come back, you know, or they might leave the company, go and just become a consumer. And then they go away and leave the company and go into a company where that company becomes a partner. You know, like there's just so many. But I think a lot of people don't get this. They sometimes build a business and try to keep people working hard, and not thinking about the bigger picture. So it's wonderful to see a company that's doing it. Out of interest, what does success mean to you personally and for the company? What's your yardstick?
Success is an interesting one. I'm working on it, sort of a lot of self. I'm working on myself a lot at the moment, because I'm very much I look forward a lot, and it's a double-edged sword because it puts me in a position where because I love product, and so I spend a lot of time looking at what's coming, what I think is where things are trending to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a real interest of mine, because it's a natural instinct of mine to look forward a lot. And sometimes that means obviously that you're not living in the present here and now and enjoying the here and now. And I think for me, success has, as I've sort of gone through the process, you look to enjoying the journey a lot more, and that's the success. If you're enjoying the journey rather than looking at an outcome, and actually that translates brilliantly into a business context, because we work in sort of, and again, it's around culture. We work in 12-week sprints, so the business is almost broken down into 12-week years, and we work on the basis of, and within that there is sort of all of the things you do that build up to reaching your goal. Now, those things that build up to doing that, the lead indicators, as they're called, are ultimately that's the more important thing to be focused on, because if you just focus on the outcome, you don't enjoy the journey there, and you also miss the steps towards it. So I think it translates really well, and so that's what I'm working on. So a roundabout answer of saying I'm now really focused on the journey as much as I can be, and it's the success for MOJU, if we were to talk outcomes, is to create a place and environment where people can really do their best work, sets them up brilliantly for later in life, whether they are straight out of uni or if they are sort of later in their career, but gives them a platform from which to go on from, because inevitably that will happen. But in the meantime, they're doing brilliant work. We're building a great business, and we're impacting consumers' lives in a really positive way, both in terms of product and the planet, etc. So that's what success looks like.
I really like it, and I like the fact that you talk about working on yourself. And I think it's, as an entrepreneur, it's quite tricky, isn't it? You got to think ahead. You got to think what does COVID mean for your business, or what what Christmas is coming. You got to plan ahead, right? There's always these things, but trying to live in the now, I definitely think is a struggle for entrepreneurs. It's not easy to enjoy the journey because you're always worried about the bump that's coming in the road, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I say it's a constant. It is a work in progress, because it's I'll never get it 100% right, and for sure.
We were talking off air a moment ago about people not getting sick because of your product. There's an interesting model around thinking ahead, where you don't charge for the product, you charge for the day you've saved them the loss of sports income or work, whatever. There's an interesting model, right, where you say we reduce the amount of sick days, for example. In an economy, that would be enormous. There's huge amounts of revenue lost in an economy because someone's sick, right?
Massively, and I caveat that with that's consumers who are saying that, not necessarily us that are saying that, in case the regulators are listening. But
of course, yeah. It's me saying it. I was saying I've taken your product and I think it saved me from getting sick. So it was actually me saying it. Yeah. So it's exactly it's an interesting thing to think about, and I think there's been a lot more around workplace well-being and health in recent years. And I certainly think there's a few things we can be doing to reduce sick days. I think if you focus on your people, again, give them there's no one big thing that's going to reduce sick days, but there's numerous things you can do, and that's giving people more control over their day. Therefore, they might be able to then sleep better because they're less anxious about certain things, or by giving people more control over their day, you give them more control over their life ultimately, and that can lead to. So there's numerous things you can do for sure, and I think it's exciting to think one positive outcome of all of this. We're in a public health
emergency still, really. And but there are some positives to come from it, which I think can there's certainly, it's focused people on health and well-being and preventative health and immunity. We touched on immunity there, and it's got a lot of people starting to really think about, what am I consuming what does my diet look like? How's that actually contributing to my health or not? How am I sleeping, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of good conversations around, and I'm an eternal optimist and really believe that some real positives can come of all this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I meet so many people that tell me that they're getting to spend more time with their families, but they're just as productive, for example. And so a lot of people say it almost as if they feel guilty, that it should all be about how much pain this whole situation is. And of course, there is a lot of pain out there. But as you say, I think we've got to try and find the positive in it. And I agree, people need to take care of themselves more. So that's wonderful, isn't it? I wanted to jump back. You mentioned Charlie, your co-founder, and this is an interesting subject, I think, for people looking to start businesses or have businesses, like having a co-founder versus not having a co-founder. You've been working together now 5 years. Clearly you still speak very well of Charlie, so it's all working. But how did you make that work? Did you have very different roles? Is it you just trusted each other? How have you managed to maintain a friendship and build a business together?
Yeah, it's quite a. I would say I've seen it play out in lots of different ways, which I'm sure you have as well, and your listeners would have done. It can play out in not a particularly nice way when certainly you've got co-founders involved, but it also can be a tremendous success and support. And I think what we found is. I wouldn't want to be building it with anyone else, the business, specifically in our case, Charlie and I, very, very complementary skill sets. He came from a sort of insurance broking background, so sales background, very, very, he's brilliant at relationships, developing and sort of fostering really strong relationships with people on the sales side, commercially. And then sort of I came from more of a essentially quite a broad sort of commercial role myself, but also had quite a big dose of sort of creativity chucked in there and things like that. So very complementary skill set. We were each other's best men. I'm sort of very, very close to him still, and he's very, we are very, very close. Our families hang out a lot, so it's almost like a brotherhood, really, more so than it is just mates. And that kind of has taken the relationship to the next level. But so that helps a lot. But in terms of when it I guess the key factors there. You don't have to have a brotherhood with or a sisterhood with the person you found the business with, but it's very much about being open and transparent about what your ambitions are, and of course those ambitions aligning, and then having very clear similar values. And for me as well, it's the energy you put in and the graft you put in, because it has to be matched. It has to be, it has to be clear. And I'm not saying you have to work like a savage all the time, but that's how we've kind of done it. We've outworked people. That's what we'll do, and we'll continue to do it because that's that comes naturally to us. We've really just outworked people. But then that's been a shared responsibility, and it's been very, very throughout. There's been no suggestion that either one of us was sort of slacking,
Well, first of all, it's an amazing thing to hear, because it's a bit like marriages these days. You feel like everyone you talk to is getting a divorce and having a difficult times. It's actually nice to hear a partnership turn out to add to the friendship. So congratulations, and you deserve it by the hard work you put into that relationship. I think the thing I love, now I've actually written a book on partnerships, which people don't need to buy now, because you just summed up the answer to it all, which I think ultimately is about having exactly what you said, the same end goal. aligning. I think having moral code alignment. These things you're mentioning, they're the key to a good partnership. So you don't need to buy my book now, folks. You just got it for free, and from Rich, he knows it. And so, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the key bit, I think, what I just highlight and make sure you agree with is having different job roles. So you have your own area, and you respect each other's area. You might have an opinion on each other's area, but you let each other have that area. That I was in business with my now wife for 10 years. And so, wow. we got married, so that was how close our partnership was. But the key to it was that, she did the design part and I did the marketing part. And I think, we had an opinion on each other's work, and we had respect for each other to listen, but we didn't interfere. Do you think that's true?
100%. I think that's exactly the same as a marriage as well. I fully respect what my wife is incredible at, and sort of let her get it. Definitely don't stick my oar in. And fundamentally, it goes both ways. So I completely agree. That's vital. But again, for me, it's a bit like the business as a whole, getting to know what it stands for, and it takes time. And I think that also, it will take a little bit of time initially for the founders to really figure out where their strengths lie. And that's almost one of the, when you think of coaching and development of people, that's one of the big things that can take time and people can get frustrated by, and also is a bit uncomfortable sometimes, looking at yourself and trying to figure out where you're strong, where you're not strong.
Yep.
So it takes time.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I think good marriages, the ones that I think have lots of arguments, actually, because you can adjust to each other and understand each other. You can have a healthy argument. I think it's really powerful in business. You can sit down and review each other and improve each other without feeling offense. It's very important. I'm interested, this kind of leads on understanding Charlie. I mean, you clearly probably had that entrepreneurial spirit in you. Was Charlie naturally an entrepreneur? I guess my question is, do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred?
I think Charlie was as well, for sure. Probably different upbringing, slightly different upbringing, and different motivations maybe to originally get into it. But definitely had that streak. In terms of born and bred, it's an interesting question because I think so many. You get entrepreneurs from all walks of life. So it wouldn't necessarily suggest that you have to come from a specific upbringing I certainly think that the seed is planted quite early on. So I would say more, it's a combination of the two, but more it's sort of born instinctively, I'd say, in many respects. Because there's one, the instinct. There is an instinct that all entrepreneurs will have. Successful entrepreneurs will have an instinct about things, and then that's coupled with this insatiable drive, tenacity, which I guess can be bred, because I think back and I definitely inherited that from both my parents, but certainly from my dad as well, specifically from my dad because of I just saw his work ethic for 35 years. So that element, I'd say you can certainly breed.
Your parents were entrepreneurs?
No. So my mum was she was a teacher for many, many years, sort of ended up teaching, sort of leading a special needs unit. And then my dad was he was an engineer as well. So he actually went into the engineering field. So he ended up running a very large mechanical and electrical engineering firm in the UK. So not entrepreneurial as such, but again, I'd caveat that with, he did take leaps of faith in his role, and he was the guy. And I know there's some crossover here. So he sort of took the role that no one wanted in Hong Kong, back in the 80s. And so that in itself, he moved his family over to Hong Kong with, for a role that he knew was going to be a huge mountain to climb, but did that. And then he did the similar thing again, sort of 8-10 years later, moved to the Middle East. So whilst he was in a corporate structure, still there's elements there, of breaking new ground. So I think everyone's got a little bit of entrepreneur in them if they really seek it out. So maybe that comes back to maybe everyone's born with a little bit of it.
Yeah, I also think what people's jobs are also impact us. So your mother as a teacher, for example, to me that's also about teaching people leadership. It's about teaching your team how to do stuff, right? That you're getting that from your mother's abilities, right? And then the engineering field, to me, that's creative. Right, that's probably where the creative part of what you're doing comes into play, right? So so it's very interesting, and I really like the point you're making around. I feel what you're translating a little bit what you said there. Purpose can breed entrepreneurship. So I'm sure the Google founders, they're not weren't entrepreneurs naturally. They're seen as a bit geeky, right? But they found this thing that people needed to order the internet, and that purpose bred them into entrepreneurship, and then they hired Eric Schmidt later, right, to help them run the business side of it. But that purpose drives you. So for listeners, I think that's really, really interesting, that point you're making there. But you probably need a natural talent of some sort to hook it onto that purpose.
Yeah, I think so. And I do find this quite an interesting one in that I've listened to a few podcasts, and you obviously look at the differences between the UK and the US, and there's almost like full-time entrepreneurs in the US. And because of the nature of, because it's like turbocharged capitalism out there, it's almost all right to be an entrepreneur who's just in it to make lots of money, just in it to grow a big business. And you get less of that in the UK. People aren't as willing to kind of stick their hand up and say, you know what, I don't really care so much for the product. Actually, I just care for the challenge of growing a business and the outcome it can generate, which I find as an interesting dynamic between the US and the UK. So I do think it's certainly, there's a lot more talk of purpose here in the UK, for sure. And I think there is generally a greater connection to the product.
I actually agree with you, and I've spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, as you know. I think in Asia, this purpose is emerging. People have made a lot of money out there, and in Asia, just to add another layer to it, there is a real desire to make the world a better place. But I think it does take maybe generational impact. Somehow, like maybe if your parents have been successful, people see money brings you happiness, or it doesn't, right? A lot of people are in emerging markets. America, it seems like money is the holy grail to it all, right? Somehow if you've got money, all your problems are solved, but we all know that's not true. Sometimes you need experience.
Yeah.
Maybe of your parents. My parents made a lot of money and then they lost it all. So I had that experience to know that money wasn't going to be the be all and end all, but sometimes in some of these emerging markets, and I'm going to call America an emerging market, that they don't have that experience, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting. I find it fascinating, the difference. We often talk about specifically the US UK thing, and the difference. Common language, but very very different. And not to say there aren't amazing purpose-driven businesses out there and mission-led businesses, but what I guess I'm saying is that they almost, it's okay to just be upfront with your intentions.
Yeah,
and it's probably a bit more so than here.
No, I agree. It's interesting discussing the cultural differences, because I think with people listening, and I've got a few listeners in America, they might think we don't know America. I mean, I personally spent a lot of time out there, but I think what it is, and what you're saying, which I really find interesting, is if I talk to entrepreneurs in America and podcast hosts that are doing this sort of thing I'm doing in America, most of the message is work, and money will come. That is the general message. You want to be rich, then just work. And I think with your company and what you're saying, what I believe in is actually it's about the journey, right? And that is not talked about enough, right? It is about enjoying the process, having a team that's happy, having a product that makes an impact and makes people's lives better. And I do actually think that that's a good message to export to America. maybe in our new trade deal, we can get that built into our new Brexit deal. But I actually
give us chlorinated chicken.
Yeah,
we'll give you that,
and we'll give you the meaning of life. It's a good trade, isn't it? But do you, I mean, I'm interested in your view on luck over the last 5 years in the business. Have you had luck? Do you feel like how do you view luck?
Luck's a really interesting one for me, because I really believe in putting yourself in the right position, and it's I think that's a major factor, rather than sitting where you are looking for it to come to you. So I think that's one aspect. I think there's so numerous. I don't think I could genuinely not say this is where we've had a lucky break, this is where we've had a bad break, because I think they're so numerous throughout the day. They're kind of like micro wins or micro losses through every single day. That certainly I wouldn't be able to put my finger on one big thing. So I think I believe I'm a bit of a, as I said, an eternal optimist, and also believe in a bit of fate and luck. But I do certainly think if you're proactive and you put yourself in the right position, I think it will come your way more often, for sure.
How do you see growing the business going forward? What's the innovation? What's next, do you think?
For us, it's we've only really, we're now established. We've done what very few managed to do, which is create a new category essentially, and build it. Despite the external pressure of obviously the very large corporate brands, and we managed to do that. But from this point forward, the reality is that few, in national terms, we've hardly scratched the surface. We're heavily sort of London Southeast. We're nationally distributed, but heavily London Southeast. Loads of headroom for growth for us, and a category that's sort of bucking the trend where functional shots is growing, everything else is in decline pretty much. Particularly in the wider soft drinks category, it's had a really tough year. We're still growing. Functional shots is still growing. We believe it's all of the growth drivers are there. To touch on them: preventative health, immunity, sustainable, sort of more conscious, sustainable mindset of the consumer, looking to buy from brands that they can trust and that they know are authentic about what they do. So there's a number of different growth drivers in addition to those that we believe gives us plenty of headroom for growth in the UK. And then of course there's sort of international markets as well, which we're sort of just scoping at the moment, but we've not sort of rushed to do international yet, because we wanted to be very significant in our domestic market. So if
there's any American entrepreneurs out there that want to build something with purpose, then maybe they could reach out and help you with distribution out there.
I'll definitely always up for a conversation.
Give America a quick hug there. 5 years into the business, I mean, that's quite a significant amount of time. Do you feel like it's gone fast, gone slow, just still at the beginning? How do you feel mentally about it?
It's a lot more grey hair. A lot more grey hair. I don't know whether that would have happened anyway. It's gone pretty quick, really. It's been a proper, but then it's one of those that feels like it's gone in a flash, but then I look back and I think of how much we've done and how much we've achieved and the work that's gone in, and the people that we've worked with, and it's actually, it feels like a bit longer then, but it's been, I think the reality is, when you get into what we do, and I'm talking very categories or very industry specific, because if you want to build a real brand with an evergreen brand that will be here in 50, 60, 70 years time, and you want to build something of real substance, it takes time. Like everything great, takes time to build. And it's very specific to what we do. Physical product, tangible product, there's certain constraints around distribution, and, it can only come so quick. Unlike some tech companies that you get where they build brand incredibly quickly and they can scale much, much quicker, which is really interesting, because I think you've seen a lot of venture money go into businesses that are consumer packaged goods businesses, chasing kind of venture returns and venture scale. But what they've all met is that kind of hard stop of, yes, but you're shifting physical product around. It's not got the same scalability as a software business. So it takes time, in short, and so we're here to build, as I said, the right business, a great business. So we're not sort of getting itchy feet at this stage, for sure. We're just and as the business grows and becomes more mature, it becomes a more fascinating, brilliant business to work in. So yeah, excited for what's to come, for sure.
Also interesting, a lot of my listeners reach out for information and support, and a lot of them have families, young families, and they dream of starting a business but feel such responsibility for feeding their little ones. I know you've had children while building the business. How's that played out for you?
Well, it's been amazing in that, but they really are they're everything, really, to me. My family, they're more important than anything. So, but at the same time, you have to balance that with building the business and being distracted and time away. So that's been challenging. But by focusing on them. So things you do make sacrifices, and really for me, the sacrifice has been more my social life, really, with mates, and my mates have been really understanding, but fundamentally don't have much of one, really. But the focus on the family helps to ground me, and hugely grateful, because none of it would be possible without having an amazing partner and wife. No, none of it would be possible. So I can sit here and say that, having kids has been pretty straightforward, but it obviously hasn't, but it's been made a lot easier by having an amazing wife.
I think you highlight something else there that's so important for people to pick up on. I think your partner in life is the most important deal you ever do. That person supporting you in your dreams, without doubt. I mean, I've invested in a few people in my time, and I always worry when their partner starts, saying things like, "I wish we could go on more holiday," and "Why are you working so hard?" And it gets really tough for the entrepreneur if they don't have that loving support, and such an important piece there. So, I feel like we should give a shout out to your wife. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure, Danielle. Definitely a shout out. Whether she would listen to this or not, I'm not sure, but she gets bored enough of my voice anyway. But I completely agree, and I think it's that. I think there's been a completely unwavering support, really, and very little pressure on me to, but I guess there's been the pressure hasn't been there, because I've really tried to do my very utmost to focus on my time and effort, and when I'm with them, and to really focus on them. So, but it's very important to me. But I feel that's where I feel huge gratitude and huge luck in finding that person.
When you quit your job and said you were going to do this business, was everyone in? Was it did you have to convince them of it?
Well, I mean, I think I think I'm still not earning what I earned back in the day. That was a stat. I think I'm still well, pretty short of where I was. So, I was doing okay, and very, very lucky to sort of to be in that position. So but it was a fundamentally a big shift and a big change. And for those, to say, people aren't naysayers because they're malicious. They're fearful of what they don't understand and what they don't know. And so that's the majority of people were, of course, saying, "Are you sure?" And frankly, it's a moonshot. You know, we went into, and for those more educated about the space, they were like, "Rich, this is going to be really hard. You want to get into drinks, beverages is probably one of the most competitive, the most competitive categories in that industry." And I said, "Well, I've never been scared of anything in my life, really, and always up for a challenge." And both Charlie and I are fiercely competitive in a kind of, I like to think, a positive way, with ourselves more than anything. So we were up for the challenge. So so we just sort of went for it, really, and it's just glad it's kind of worked out the way it has so far.
It's also that belief, isn't it? I think it's, you only regret in life what you don't do. So I guess if you had this idea, you've got to do it. And another point I want to pick up on what you said, because I want people to feel this, is I think children, and Rich, you can jump in if you agree or don't agree, but I think children, they get energy from you. So if that, you're out there and you're doing something you love, you come back and you're building something that's purposeful, that's helping people, in your case, enjoy their job all the way through to and be healthier. I think that is something really inspiring for your children. And so taking time out to go and do that is just as important as taking time out to spend time with them, right?
Yeah, I'd really agree. And I can only, aspire, looking up to my folks in a different way, but it definitely is, it engenders a lot of the sort of, that real formative stuff in kids. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good observation there.
My son, I told him today, I'm interviewing an entrepreneur on my podcast show, and he said, "Okay, Dad, I'm off to the zoo. I'll tell you about it later." There was a part of me that was like, "Why? I just want to go to the zoo with you," But yeah, exactly. We've got to do good things, and it's beyond just being there all the time for our kids. And so, yeah, it's inspirational to hear you also having that view. I also see a new brand, by the way, a new sub-brand, Moonshots. Let's get that.
Moonshots.
Let's get that brand on the shelf.
That's true.
Yeah.
I didn't try and chat that in. That wasn't a sneaky one.
Yeah,
I didn't even think. But
like
yeah,
it.
Moonshots.
It's probably going to come out next week. You're planning ahead.
Yeah, exactly. It's been tainted slightly by our Prime Minister recently with his chat around vaccines. But
I didn't see that.
He talked about, I think, a vaccination program that was sort of no one's ever seen before, and he called it the Moonshot, I think. So he's gone and ruined that one.
Okay, right. No one's ever going to launch a brand called Moonshot now. Okay, good. All right. Look, I could talk to you forever. I just wanted to quickly ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll let you get on with running your business. Your education. How do you feel about education? How's it played a role in your life?
I think it probably defined, in as much as sort of corporate working sort of informed how we didn't want to build the business, or taking the best bits and sort of leaving the worst bits behind. I had a really interesting. I basically was that kid at school who was constantly told off for talking in class. Didn't always, was sort of challenging, I guess, challenging teachers as much as I possibly could with questions, and but also just academically just wasn't that interested fundamentally, until a bit later in school life. I got a little bit better, and then university I really sort of bucked my ideas up, because I just didn't want to squander it and throw it away. But what I found is I was state educated and found through that system that it was very, very sort of, it was quite dogmatic. We sort of touched on it, sort of that word again, or relatively formulaic in that, you study sciences or sort of the more traditional subjects, and then you look to go into professional services or become a doctor. or an engineer, or there was very little talk at that time of like the creative industries and things like that. So I wouldn't be where I am today if I'd potentially gone down another route. So I definitely don't, there's no regret, or I wish I'd worked harder at school, to be honest, because it would have just been a bit easier if I just applied myself a bit more. But it definitely taught me a lot as well. So that's how I kind of feel about education. I'm not entirely convinced. I think it's I don't think kids are being prepared for the outside world particularly well often. I think there's a lot of merit in sort of more practical side of things, and actually teaching people about the real practical stuff that you have to, go through in life. What's a mortgage? How does it work? How do you save now in order to put yourself in a good position for later? Or, what are the fundamentals that you'll sort of come up against as a young adult? It's interesting actually, because thinking about it now is, our daughter's going to go to a Montessori, and I'm sure there's lots of pros and cons, or at least people who are pro Montessori, con Montessori, or whatever it may be. But I love that concept of them being sort of just taught how to figure out life. Yep. And being trusted even at a young age to kind of figure it out and be more practical. So, hey, why don't we just carry that through the schooling system to later?
I'm actually surprised how many people don't know about Montessori. My son's just started going to a Montessori school as well. And for those my listeners that don't know, I mean, the basic principle is you don't have a set time for maths 1 hour, set time for art 1 hour. You basically have a room full of stuff, and you can go and do what you love to do, and you can move around that room doing what you love, and you can focus all day on the one thing you love, or you can go and do something else. And I think that is how life should be. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I actually think, what you're talking about there is really, really fascinating. I could probably have you on just talking about education, but the whole drinks industry set in its ways, you come in and do something fresh and new. I think education also needs that. I'm a bit biased right now. My wife's about to launch a subscription box, which is based on the Montessori model.
Oh, wow.
Trying to bring Montessori to the mainstream, because Montessori still is quite hard to access for a lot of people. So you absolutely agree with you that there's a change there needed, and I agree with you. The kids aren't prepared properly for what's coming, and it worries me a little bit about university in particular, because I feel like there's a pressure to go to university because you're never going to get a job unless you've got it, and then there's the debt that builds up. So I don't know if you have a quick opinion on that. I don't want to.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, being on the hiring end, we see a lot. There are a lot of graduates out there with degrees, and it's not a differentiating factor anymore. So, if people believe that that's the route to it's literally a hygiene factor now in some respects. For a lot of employers, we don't just focus on university degrees, because actually we've hired people from out of apprenticeships who are amazing. That's a different thing entirely. It's challenging. There are sort of diamonds in the rough sometimes in that regard. But I'm not a massive. I think it should be. It's much more about less cookie cutter and people, to your point, following what they're good at, where their strengths are, where their passions lie, and maybe that's not university.
How do you hire people in that regard? Do you have a worked out method now for figuring out whether people are going to enjoy working with you? How do you do it?
Increasingly, it's more it's more values-based hiring, very, very sort of focused on that. So people have to be really very much aligned with how we see the world, and they must share that kind of view. So that's one aspect. But then we've got better at hiring as we've gone. It's another skill, and something we've got better at. Again, not something that we'll ever get completely right, but also just trying to not being too prescriptive. That's something we've been doing more recently, not too prescriptive on university education, for example. So you're sort of casting the net further. And also making sure that we're trying to get people in from different backgrounds. So you've got that, we don't therefore just hire out of red brick unis, and therefore if you're hiring just out of red brick unis, more often than not, you're hiring a certain type of person from a certain background of a certain race. and that's a problem. So that's something that we're trying to address by, as I say, just casting the net a lot further, but also we will be looking to build sort of closer relationships with the places and institutions that we can get access to talent, basically that don't kind of fit that mold of the red brick uni.
Well, it's wonderful to hear as well, fresh thinking on recruitment in that regard. I think it's definitely needed. So just ending the podcast, I'd love to ask you, if you went back to your younger self, Rich, and gave some advice, what would it be?
Oh, God. What would it be? I'd probably say enjoy the moment a bit more. Enjoy the moment a little bit more, and almost try and communicate and articulate that feeling of when you really work super hard for something and you achieve it. Because that's what I was kind of lacking when I was in my school years, actually, that application of effort and the amazing feeling that you get from when it comes off, was something I'll probably go back and tell myself to sort of knuckle down, and actually, because it's an amazing feeling. So when you achieve something after putting a lot of work in, whereas I kind of was just cruising a little bit when I was younger, just trying to, so that's a couple of things, but yeah, probably those.
That's one of the best answers I've had. I really, sorry to anyone my other guests, I really enjoy that point that there is an element of, I sometimes look at my son and I'm really, happy and that he's happy. And then suddenly I kick into like worrying, what if coronavirus gets him? And, have all these, bit like you were saying earlier, the planning ahead piece kicks in. And sometimes that's a mistake, you just enjoy the moment where you're happily looking at what you've got and enjoying it. And I think if we all did that when we were younger, we'd be a lot happier. I think a lot of young people also worry about the future, and they're always concerned about tomorrow instead of just, hey, right now I'm healthy. My parents are healthy. I've, life's okay, and just enjoying that moment. And so good advice. Thank you for sharing it. I'm going to quickly sum up some of the things that I've taken away from this. I think great things take time to build. Definitely sits with me as so true. And I want people to take that home and remember, whatever you dedicate to, it's not build it, sell it, move on. It really is, a lifestyle choice. It's not a tactic. And I like that a lot, that whole great things take time to build. I think this find your passion and take time out to do that is also golden advice. It's just so true. And I think for a lot of people that are like, what's my purpose? Well, sometimes people don't give themselves the time to figure it out. And certainly the passion part, as you find the passion part is so important to take time out to do that. So thank you for enabling your team to do that, and thank you for that advice. Enjoy the journey, which we've mentioned quite a few times, and I kind of appreciate the moment a little bit more, as you put it. I really like that too. So Danielle, you rock. Just make sure we maybe she'll listen, but awesome. Everybody I guess needs a Charlie in their lives. If it's a business partner or a friend, you're very lucky, and that's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's so wonderful to hear. And I do think that we need to think about Neptune shots, maybe then moonshots at the end. But once in your life, you got a moonshot. You got it once in your life. You got to go for it, and you've gone for it. And so, pleasure to have you on the show. Pleasure to hear your story, and thank you for sharing your insights with us, Rich.
Cheers, Simon. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope you found Rich's insights useful. I know myself personally, as an entrepreneur since the age of 15 years old, sitting down and talking to people like Rich, I learned quite a lot, so I hope you did too. If you found what he had to say useful, then do me a favour, go onto his social media and give his company a like. Doesn't take much, but it would mean the world to me, and I'm sure Rich and his team would appreciate it. You can go a step further, of course, and go out and try one of his amazing drinks. That's what I'm going to do now. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to the Good Luck Club podcast today. We know you have thousands of podcasts you could be listening to, and you take the time out to listen to ours. We feel exceedingly grateful.